Hello, welcome to Maritime Conversations. I'm Swaroop Anand. I'm, of course, joined by Commodore Srikant Kesnur. Hello, Commodore, how are you doing?
Good. As always, wonderful to connect with you, Swaroop, and look forward to more maritime conversations.
Definitely. So, in an earlier conversation and an earlier episode, we'd spoken about shipbuilding in the Navy, the Atmanirbharta, that the Navy shows. We spoke about the Leander class, the first big project, the Giris rather, starting with the Nilgiri. We spoke about that. Um, I'd want to kind of expand on that and talk about, Atmanirbharta, about the shipbuilding, in the Navy, what it means for the Indian Navy, what it means for the nation. Let's take it from there. After the Giris, after the Leanders, shipbuilding in India.
Yes, of course, we ought to do it because it's a kind of interesting phase.
Right,
The last of the enders finished in about 81, 82, and then now almost 40 years later, we have
right,
come to build an aircraft carrier. So this
right.
this 40 years is a very very interesting journey because we gone up in scale, we gone up in magnitude, we gone up in complexity, we gone up in
Hmm.
sophistication, and
Right,
we've done lots of interesting things here. You know,
right.
so you take the Godavari class that followed the Leanders, you
Hmm.
take the Delhi class, then big success stories, and then of course the Calcutta class that follow. The Shivalik class in between,
Right, right,
the strength brigades, and
right.
from the Calcutta class, then of course you go on to the aircraft carriers. But
Mm.
there are many other things we have done in between too. We built
Right.
submarines in early 90s. We had the Kukri class corvettes. We had the
That's
Kamorka
right.
class. We had the LSTs. We had the smaller missile boats. So the Indian shipbuilding has been busy. There have been
Mm.
several designs that have come up, and all of them tell a very interesting story. Very briefly, how this story starts off. We can discuss some of these
Hmm.
classes later, but how the
Definitely.
story starts off in a sense is in the late 60s and the mid 70s, the Navy has two parallel, sort of streams, so to say. One is
Mm.
it's importing Russian equipment now, and it's seeing the missile boats, the Petyas, the
Hmm.
second class of the Petyas that come, missile boats that come after the war, the Nanuchka class corvettes, the Durgs, as we
That's
call
right.
them.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, you're building ships based on you have British ships, the earlier ones, and now you're building the Leanders based on a British design.
That's
So
right.
what the naval planners, builders, everyone sees is that the Russian ships are heavy on armament, but
Hmm.
they don't have adequate sea legs, and
Right.
therefore comfort factor, endurance, and things like that. And while
Yeah.
the Western origin, including the Leanders, have fairly good endurance and higher levels of, sort of crew comfort,
Mm.
they probably don't pack in as much punch as the Russian ships do. So
Right.
I
Right.
think someone gets this wonderful idea of
Let's
integrating the
marry the
two.
two.
Let's marry the
Right.
two, and let's see what
Hmm.
will come out of that. So you get the best of both worlds. So
Right.
in a small way, this experiment starts a significant
Mm.
way in the mid 70s when they put the P-20 missile boats on the erstwhile Talwar and Trishul. I think the Whitby class.
Right.
You know,
Right.
they put so missiles replace the guns there, and therefore now you have frigates with missiles, so they can go farther and give a different dimension to naval warfare. I mean, naval warfare
Right.
from the Indian perspective. So that experiment then leads to other follow-ons. So it's a very interesting sort of
Yeah.
time, if one.
Definitely. I think I hope this becomes a series of conversations that we have about shipbuilding. I think what I think we should talk about in this particular episode. I think we should talk about the Godavari class for sure and the Delhi
Absolutely.
class. And you have a connection with both of these, and we'll come to that
That's
possibly at
right.
the end. Um, but I think the Godavari class, starting with the Godavari class, of course, Commodore, it just comes on the back of the Leanders. These are frigates, which essentially would have probably been the follow-ups to the Leanders, which were already built. Project 16, it was christened. I think that was the name, the nomenclature that was used. Project 16 for the Godavari class. So how and you really spoke about how the planners really wanted to marry the best of both worlds, the Soviet designs, the Soviet ships, and of course the Western ships. So let's talk about the Godavari class. What did it entail? Right from the design to the shipbuilding. About the Godavari class. Why were they different, and why were they better than the Leanders?
Well, they were fundamentally different, Swaroop, and this is the important point to remember.
Right.
While the Leanders were outstanding and they were elegant and beautiful, and I've commanded them, so I'm very partial
Right.
to them. Commanded one of them, I mean the Vindhyagiri. The point to note is that at the end of the day, Leanders were a British design, though we kept improvising, though the last two were stretched Leanders, the Vindhyagiri
Right.
and Taragiri, but they were
Right.
essentially British design. The most fundamentally important point about the Godavari class is that they were Indian design. So this is now a huge boost to Indian shipbuilding and Indian design, because now the Indian Navy's design bureau, now gets into act, and we start, and that's very important. Please remember,
Right.
at that time there was nothing indigenous or very little indigenous we were designing.
Right.
And this is where Captain Mohan Ram and his team,
Right.
deserve a big hurrah, because this is India's first design. What
Right.
is also interesting here is that, like I told you, in some ways the Godavari class is a marriage of the Leander sort of hull, little extended, and
Right.
propulsion, along with the Nanuchka class, the corvette's weapon fit. You know,
Right.
so the Godavari class had the P-20 missiles. It had the 57 mm gun. It
Right.
had the close-in weapon systems in the form of 30 mm gun.
Mm-hmm.
But it now was carried on a much bigger platform. What were the other important aspects about the Godavari?
Right.
First, it became the first non-carrier platform to be able to have two helicopters, and
Right.
two seeking helicopters
Right.
is huge.
Right.
And please
Right.
remember that this was the time, mid 80s, late 80s, that we acquired the Seeking 42 Bravos from the UK, which at that time were the most sophisticated one. So
Right.
two Seekings embarked on a Godavari class in the late 80s, early 90s, was formidable combat power. It was formidable combat.
Right. Right.
So you had a platform capable of embarking two Seekings, which was very, very good. The third important thing is that while this trend had started with the Leanders, in Godavari class, the operations room became the heart, with the computer aided action information system, what was called the KAIO or KAILS, the
Right.
KAIO, that became the heart, so to say, and
Right.
so Indian Navy really sort of came into a more sophisticated form with the Godavari class. There's a very very classic photograph of INS Ganga that time in the Navy Desk calendar. Now, Navy Desk
Right.
calendar, normally you would have ships firing, aircraft flying, and all that. But that
Right.
time, to advertise, you had a simple photograph of the Godavari class operations room, the then captain of Ganga, SPS Chotu Dalal, peering over the ops room display with the four specialist officers peering over displays with their headphones. I mean, it spoke a completely new language for the Navy, so to say. I mean, today's Navy takes that for granted.
Right.
Uh, Also, huge levels of integration. I mean, you had the Western and the British as it is. I think
Right.
the Caio was Italian. They had Indian
That's right.
communication systems. The
That
EW
was
came from elsewhere. There were French fittings. So it was a fantastic integration of diverse weapons and sensors. So the Navy strengths and integration came out very well with the Godavari class. So I think
Right.
all of these were very, very important,
Mm,
so they were
mm.
homegrown products. They were something we could be proud about, which is why they were sent all over the world. Godavari went to New
Right.
York, Ganga went
Flying
to
the flag, showing
Tokyo,
the
flying
flag.
the flag. There were big things when Ganga was commissioned. It was, I think, the then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi who was the chief guest. So they were the toast of the town, toast of the country. And an
Mm.
interesting factoid about this, Swaroop, you must listen, is that
Right.
the idea of integrating this,
Mm-hmm.
the Russian sensors with
Sure.
because that was the only thing that India could do then.
Right.
Having a big size Russian ship for a similar fully Western thing was beyond budget, beyond capacity, beyond many things. It
Right.
happened in a rundown bus journey where
Right.
Captain Mohan Ram and then Captain or Commodore Premveer Das, who was the director of
Right.
naval plans. Later,
Yeah.
of course, he retired as the FOC East. Both of them
East.
were
Yeah.
going in a bus journey for the funeral of another departed colleague. And when
Oh.
they were talking this. Uh, just the idea came, and I think Captain Das, Commodore Das, told Captain Mohan Ram, look, can we integrate? Or Mohan Ram gave this idea and said, brilliant. So I think Mohan Ram gave the idea and Das said, if you can do it, I'll sell the idea up to our bosses.
Right.
So
Right.
it actually began in that sort of very um, um, unglamorous fashion in a bus journey. But that's how
Right.
one of India's sort of best, most successful stories of shipbuilding happened. In a way, in a way. This is
Right.
related, I
Right.
think, in Mohan Ram's book and other things.
Oh, definitely. I think it's definitely a book that one should read, and I think we'll put it up as well. Um, now coming to of course, the Godavari class had three
Mm,
frigates, which were uh, built, and these were of course commissioned in the 80s. They were launched. They were of course launched in the early to mid 80s and commissioned mid to late 80s, the Godavari, the Ganga, and the Gomti. Of course, after that came the Delhi class. The Delhi class of the ships which are again built in India. Let's unpack that. Commodore, tell us about the Delhi class. What it meant, how were they different, how were they better, and what it meant for the Navy.
yes, I mean, the Delhi class, while the Godavari class had several things to um, commend and recommend about itself, apart from being carrying the flag as our first design, uh, in a sense, at that size. Um, it still was a work in progress, as everyone would acknowledge, and that's just as it would be. So, in
Mm-hmm.
some ways, the Delhi class sort of took that further. You know, I think the Godavari class, a couple of people felt, I mean, a couple of things that came out of it was that probably the hull form could be a bit more fine.
Mm,
Secondly, you needed a sort of through deck, through upper deck. You know, so
mm,
so there were a couple of things that people felt that Godavari class ought to have had,
right.
and they wanted bigger ships. So in some senses, the Delhi class is a marriage of the Godavari class, the SNF,
Ah,
destroyers, which
right.
joined us, in the 80s. The SNF, the Rajput class, again, formidable. They deserve a separate conversation. They were fanatical fan following. I also did
Yeah,
my training there, but we talk
you
about
did.
that
Yes,
some other time. We'll
definitely.
talk about that some other time. The essential point is that the Delhi class was a fantastic marriage between the
Mm,
Godavari class and the Rajput class. So now the Delhi class were super sophisticated destroyers at about six and a half
right.
thousand tons, but they
Yep.
were carrying the sleek form, the sleek form of the SNF, along with all the sophistication of the Godavari class. So you had the same ability to carry two seeking helicopters. You had now a new missile system, the Uran or the Harpoonski, instead of the earlier
Right.
surface to surface missiles, which was a quantum leap. You had longer range surface to air missiles. You had 630, a larger velocity, more firing close and weapon system. But above all, you had fine lines in the Delhi class. So, its radar signature and things like that were lesser. There were certain stealth features incorporated. Most importantly, Swaroop, and I'll of course come to this in my experiences, the Delhi class where they radiated a sort of aura. I mean, and you brought in gas turbines on the Delhi class like the SNF instead of the steam
Steam
propulsion for the Godavari
turbines.
class.
Yeah.
So that had its own sort of, if you can say, certain benefits. So all in all, the Delhi was not just about the Godavari class. Most importantly, Delhi also provided what could be called full-fledged uh, flag
A
capacities.
combat
That means
platform, a
a
command
combat
platform.
platform, a command platform for the admiral to operate.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so the admiral and his staff. Now you had the Godavari class didn't have a separate bridge for the admiral,
Right.
and his staff The Delhi class had a separate flag bridge for the admiral and his staff. It had a separate flag operations room. You know,
Oh wow. Right.
so for the and more importantly, it had more crew space, more officers' cabins.
Sure.
All of these things are very important. If you want to have it's to have to be a blue water navy, you need to have long legs. You need to have certain
Oh
degree
yeah.
of ship's crew
Yeah.
comfort
Yeah. Yeah.
and things like that to last longer. You need to have greater fuel carrying abilities. You need to have greater water carrying abilities or water making abilities. You need to have greater rations and victuals keeping ability. So all of that, I think, manifest themselves in the Delhi class in a wonderful way. So
Right.
Delhi class was in many ways. Of course, there's always scope for improvement, but Delhi class in many ways was a complete work. Be it looks, be it combat capabilities, be it as a command platform, particularly when the flat top is not there. This was the great part about Delhi, the Project 15.
Right.
And
Right.
therefore they were again the toast of the town, the country. And remember, the INS Delhi, and its follow-ons also have
Sister.
a history. I mean, we've talked
Oh,
about their
of
predecessors
course.
having great history. So
Yeah.
if the first Delhi was born in the dawn of independence, the second Delhi, commissioned in 1997, 15th November, was
That's
born
right.
50 years of independence.
Right.
So i
Right.
i
Right.
think there are these great historical coincidences. So
Right.
Delhi in many ways brought a new wave, a new energy, a new sort of zest and momentum to the Indian Navy and Indian shipping.
Right. Right. Um, so of course, the Delhi class had three ships: the Delhi, the Mysore, and the Mumbai, D61, D60, and D62 respectively. And they were of course commissioned between '97, like you
Yes.
mentioned, to I think about 2001 when the Mumbai was. Was commissioned. Super. So apart from, of course, the Project 15 and 16, these were the highlights in about the 20 odd years that they were, the shipbuilding of India and the Indian Navy. Apart from the Godavari class and the Delhi class, there were other, ships that were built as well. So a little bit about that. What were the other things that were,
Yes.
the other?
We should not forget them.
Yeah.
They're kind of significant in their own way, and they
Right.
illustrate the different challenges and what you would say capabilities that the Indian Navy had to build in different spheres. So some of the more important ones, I'm not talking in any chronological manner, is that
Right.
we remember we built the Kukri class corvettes, the Kukri and
Right.
the Kura class that came. Again, they played a very important role in fleet operations. They were more focused on anti-air warfare. They didn't
Right.
have anti-submarine capabilities too much. They had a helicopter deck, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily having a helicopter all the time, but ability to receive. But the Kukri class and the follow-on Kora class, which were further improvement in terms of the outfit, were very
Mm-hmm.
important because they carried. They were with small crew, small officers, but tremendously spirited. So the hot shots in the navy, if you can say, the best of guys, the navigator, the hot shot commanding officers in the rank of commander went to
Mm-hmm.
Kukri class. The Kukri class and the
Right.
Kora class. So they had a sense of drive, dynamism. It was prestigious to be
Mm-hmm.
to be in a Kukri class and to compete with other fleet ships, to the SNF, the Godavari class, the Delhi class, and hold
Right.
your own. So Delhi, the Kukris were where the moral center of gravity, so to say, lay. I mean, I've never served on them, but
Right.
I can imagine many of my friends who did and why they say so. Then there were also the smaller missile boats. We brought the Veer class from as a replacement for the earlier missile boats. We brought the
Right.
I think the Veer was the Tarantula class, if I'm not wrong, and
Right.
we built the same with again certain improvements and improvisations and innovations in India. Then an important thing we started was the LSTL, the LST large,
Right.
which began with
Mm-hmm.
Magar. Magar, I came
Of
again
course.
in mid 80s. It was recently decommissioned, but
It
people
was.
again
Yeah.
forget how important it was. Magar took part in the IPKF. You needed large amphibious ships. So subsequently, being able to build large amphibious ships were on account of this. We built,
Right.
of course, to German design, but we built the two submarines SSK, in Mazgon Dock in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioned them in the early 90s. Then there were other ships, the training ship, the tanker. I think Aditya got commissioned in the GRSE somewhere around 99 or 2000. The LCUs were being
That's
built.
right.
So
April
uh, as a,
2000. Yeah.
yeah. So you see, we're talking of a busy shipbuilding calendar, other shipyards getting into the act. I think Tir was built, and the training ship. Of course, survey ships were built. So this was
Right.
a very busy time. And I think then
Mm-hmm.
after the Delhis, we started on the Shivaliks and the Kolkata class, which of course
That's
I
right.
think
Yeah.
begets a separate discussion.
Definitely, definitely. I think I can see multiple episodes. I think I really hope that there's going to be a series of conversations because we have to do a separate one on the SNFs. For sure. And of course the Shivali class, the Kolkata class, and of course our aircraft carrier. So I really hope we have multiple conversations on those. Now coming to your relationship, you were the SEO, in fact, the commissioning SEO of the Delhi and the EW of Ganga. Tell us about the ships. I'm sure they are very special to you. The Godavari class, the Ganga at about 3,600 tons, and Delhi at about 6,500 tons. So tell us about the ships. Tell us about your experience, your time with those wonderful ships.
Yeah, always special, and I've written about both of them in
Right.
Quarterdeck. Yes, of course, both very very special tenures.
Yeah.
I joined Ganga end of 1992, November 92, and spent almost 20 months there. And remember, this
Hmm.
was a kind of fraught period in Indian history. The situation was fragile, a
Right.
strategic situation, and yet the fleet strength was somewhat depleted. So the Ganga used to put out to
Mm.
sea very, very, very often, and
Right.
we were in the front line, so to say. And at that time, an operational ship, an operational EW platform with a EW system, and having two Sea Kings with equally fantastic equipment, I think it was wonderful. It was challenging. It was cutting edge operations, and we were able to do several wonderful things. Got a great
Mm-hmm.
sense of satisfaction about our tenures, and many of us are in touch even now. The Ganga crew,
Right.
with particularly with our commanding officers and the rest of people. So very satisfying in terms of what it meant. The Delhi was similar, though Delhi, the challenges as the commissioning crew are different. We joined a year before commissioning, and therefore getting the ship to be operational, going through all the phases. You don't get a ready-made ship. You don't get a sort of crew that's already there. You got to work up people together. You got to ensure that everything is fine. But remember the communication fit of Delhi at that time was completely Indian, so it was wonderful.
Mm.
And
Right.
again, there was a sense of both legacy and history, and some very amazing crew experiences. And Delhi crew bond so beautifully. We meet every
Right.
5 years, the commissioning crew of Delhi,
Lovely.
and reminisce about our
That's
old times.
lovely.
So those are
Right.
some fantastic experiences that we carry. One very small factoid, I must tell you this. What was different about Delhi is that when we did the first or second contractor sea trials, and I mean, it met all the standards beautifully. It smashed, so to say.
Mm.
When we were going at a top speed of 29 or 30 knots inside the bridge, when you shut the bridge door, you couldn't
Mm.
hear you couldn't hear a thing. It was like
Oh,
the
wow.
old fridge का advertisement आवाज ही नहीं करता है. I mean, imagine a 6,500 ton destroyer going full clip at
Right.
30 knots, and inside the bridge you can't feel a thing except that
Oh,
movement on your
lovely.
radar. You're
Yeah.
making it out. It was a beautiful feeling. It was like a pilot
Right.
would feel when he's going 2 or 3 Mach, I suppose. You know. So
Right.
these were some great experiences. Of
Right.
course, many, many, many. But I think that
Yeah.
requires again many separate conversations.
Definitely. No, I think this is like the Rolls Royce, right? At the back seat of the Rolls Royce, you don't hear a thing, outside. I'm sure
Absolutely,
the Delhi was like the Rolls Royce of
it
the Indian
was.
Navy then. Super. I think
Not then. I mean, with their midlife upgrades and all that, you can be sure they
I'm
still
sure today as
continue.
well.
Yeah,
On
yeah.
lovely. On that note, I think we come to the end of the episode. Thanks so much, Commodore. For talking about Atmanirbharta and the Godavari and the Delhi class. Of course, like I said, and I've mentioned it, I think twice already. Now we should do a series of conversations about the different classes and shipbuilding in India because there's so much to talk about. So thanks so much for joining us, guys.